Hello Mayhem Makers, Mindy from Quilting Mayhem. We're going to try this video again. So apparently my last one didn't record all the way. The only problem that we're going to run into is that I have already trimmed all my blocks. So unfortunately you will not see the excess I trim off, but I'm going to show you how to trim. Shouldn't make a difference for you guys. If you have any questions or problems, just reach out to me. And I'll walk you through it with your own blocks. But I'm going to try to at least discuss any problems you might run into and show you how to trim your blocks so that when we release the pattern layout next week, you're ready to go. Everything's trimmed up nice and neat. So this time, next round, I'm going to pause it and hopefully it'll keep recording when I come back. So let's cross our fingers. Okay, and we're still rolling. Yay! So this is what your block is going to look like, all right? But it's going to be bigger on these two corners because I told you make these squares bigger, right? So you should definitely have fabric to trim. And one of these days, you know, I'm going to do a video that shows you what it looks like me trying to do these videos because I'm sure it's highly entertaining to watch me struggle with just simple recording. I'm a quilter, not a video recorder, and I appreciate everybody's patience in helping point things out like, hey Mindy, your video is not quite what we expected. So there we go. We'll get the glare out of there. All right, so lay your block. What I did is, so this upper right hand corner to lower left hand corner, kind of a diagonal going this way. All right. So unless you're trimming left-handed, start with, this half square triangle, your upper right, this one lower left. If you have a 12.5 inch square, highly recommend. This is the one you want to use because this is the size you need. If you don't have one, I do recommend investing in one. I've had this one forever and it comes out when I need it. This is the biggest one I have in my sewing room. Because I generally don't do much bigger than this, but this is a common size. So if you don't have one, I do recommend it. When you trim, these two corners should be pretty dead on. Hopefully your diagonal is fairly straight on. Not gonna lie to you, some of mine are a little iffy, and if I had a little more time and patience, I would probably go back, press them a little better with a little more starch to get my diagonal a little straighter, but I don't worry about it that much anymore. I got too many quilts in my lineup to stress on whether or not that line's super straight, because when it's done, nobody knows, nobody cares. So keep these two corners dead on. For the most part, most of your blocks should be within here with excess, most likely on these two sides because these should be bigger. And you just trim up the right-hand side and across the top. Like I said, my excess has been trimmed, so I can't really show you that. But then flip it. These two edges will be straight. I'm trying to stay. It doesn't help that I'm short. I'm trying to do this top-down video. All right. And then so you lay your two straight edges here, and then you would trim these two sides. Now, what you may run into, and it's fairly obvious in this block, that's why I grabbed this one back out to show you guys, is over here, this side doesn't actually go all the way to 12.5 right here. And I noticed in some of my blocks that they didn't always quite make it out to that 12.5, and that's okay. I'm going to teach you how to work with that. Don't grab the seam ripper, put the seam ripper down. We're not going to worry about it. You can, before you trim, if you want, you could always starch your block some more. Make sure it's got a nice good press so that it is spread out as flat and out as far as it possibly can. Back in the day when I first started quilting, we called that aggressive pressing, where we were like to the point of stretching fabric, but that was back then. We don't quite get that aggressive, but sometimes it does help get it to the width that you need. I'm just going to put a pin in it though, because here's the trick I'm going to teach you. And I know you're going to call me out on your corners and all that. I have at least 1/4 inch. We're good. We're not going to lose that guy. Don't worry. So what will happen though, as you go and lay whatever the next block is going to be sewn with it, what you will do is take the block with the straight edge. You know this one's all 12.5 both ways. Lay your kind of wonky-ish one. And like, I know this came to 12.5, and I know over here it came to 12.5. So I'm lining up the edges I know are 12.5, but I'm not going to force it to match down here, because then you would essentially have kind of a divot in your block. If you try to just make everything line up, it would follow that divot, and then you have weird puckers in your quilt as you go. What's going to happen is I then just kind of pin it. So I pin things in place, especially if you're new, to make sure that your block meets at the beginning and the end, because last thing you want is these corners to not match. So line those up, line this center at least. And what will happen is you're going to sew your 1/4 inch. It doesn't matter if your block's facing this way, sew your 1/4 inch. And then this little bit, I'm going to see if I can get it on camera for you guys. There's just a little bit, and it's not really a whole lot. Just this little bit, that it's shorter on the top block than the bottom block. That 1/4 inch seam allowance, as long as it's following that bottom block that you know is 12.5 inches, you're going to follow that bottom block. Let that little bit just hide inside that seam. It's not going to matter. Everything's still going to come out nice and straight. So I hope that made sense. You're just going to ignore this little bit as you sew your seam allowance, but definitely don't like stretch it, make it match, because see how now this block is already starting to act weird, starting to puck over here, and all of that pucker. So make sure it's nice, flat. You're just going to ignore that little bit that's just kind of what I would call a whoop-de-doo in there. You're just going to ignore that guy, because in the end, everything's going to stay that 12.5. You're going to sew that seam, and everything's going to stay the way it should. All right. So as you trim, if there are little pockets that do something funny and you're worried about it, then just put little pin markers in there so that you can make sure when you put your 2 blocks together, they'll all come out in the end. And no, this is not the layout, so please don't do this. Don't start sewing blocks. All right, but notice how everything will stay nice once you get that 1/4 inch and you don't get any curves in the short edges. All right. So that's all we're doing. Just trim your blocks. If you have those little bits that don't quite meet, just take your pin, mark it, and then if you have questions when you go to sew blocks together, when I give you the final layout next week, let me know, because I can walk you through it. If you're local and you want to come see me and talk about it, we can do that. I'll gladly help you any way I can. We can video chat, any of that kind of stuff. This day and age, we can communicate any way we want. But so just clean it up, because you don't want that excess. You leave that excess, you get lazy, and you don't trim up your blocks, they're really going to go every which way. You saw how just that little bit, when I tried to adjust to meet it, how it started to offset the block and how it would lay. So it doesn't take much to make a block go very rogue in how it will lay within the quilt. You will not get a nice flat quilt top. You'll have puckers and things, and then if you take it to a long armor, they get really cranky about those things. Ask me how I know. So hopefully that was good enough. It recorded this time. So I really hope it makes sense on the trimming. Like I said, if you have questions, let me know. I'll gladly walk you through it. Or, if you need to come see me, those kinds of things. We'll take care of it. We'll get you there, because next week is layout and we're done. We just slap it all together and magic happens and we're done, right? So hopefully everything goes well. No more seam ripping, no more tears. We're at the end. We're going to have a beautiful quilt at the end, hopefully, of next week or the next week after that. I know some of us a little short on time these days. So whenever you get them done, show the quilt. Pretty please. We love seeing the quilt. So share what you're doing. We love just seeing all your fabric choices and how they end up in the end. All right, so have a great weekend. Maybe we'll see you at the show or at the shop. Whatever, you know. I love seeing you guys, and I love when you share. So have a fabulous weekend. Keep on stitching.